Blessed is he who reads aloud the words of the prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written therein, for the time is near. Revelation 1:3. So let's dive in and trust the Lord that he will give you wisdom and understanding as we go verse by verse through the book of Revelation. Always remember Acts 17:11, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily whether these things were so.
Revelation chapter 14. Winepress of the wrath of God. Revelation 14, verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. The fate of the 144,000. Chapter 14 answers two important questions raised by chapter 13. The beast of chapter 13 was terrifying and awesome. He even can make war against the saints and overcome them. Is he completely victorious over all God's people? The second question has to do with this satanic dictator himself. What happens to the beast and his followers? Not 143,999. None are missing. I have lost none. They have come through the tribulation miraculously, just like the three Hebrews in Daniel chapter 3. By the way, where was Daniel? Who preserves even us today? Jesus Christ. Not methods or programs. The person. When was the last time you told him you loved him? Note, they are standing with him on Mount Zion. We think of heaven as remote. It seems more likely that this is another dimension of present existence, not necessarily removed from ours. Revelation 14, verse 2. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. And the voice which I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. Revelation 14, verse 3. And they sang a new song before the throne, and before the four living creatures, and the elders. And no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth. The Lamb and the 144,000 on Mount Zion. The 144,000 certainly haven't been defeated by the beast. Here they are triumphant, worshiping and standing firm with Jesus. Why are they gathered on Mount Zion? Zion is the place where the Messiah gathers his redeemed and reigns over the earth. Some commentators see this as the heavenly Zion spoken of in Galatians 4:26, and the 144,000 as victims of the beast. But why? What does that prove? The 144,000 are like the Hebrews who survived the fiery furnace in Daniel chapter 3, verses 19 through 25. They are evidence of God's ability to preserve his people. The followers of Satan and the beast may have a mark on their hand or forehead, but this is just a copy of the idea behind the identifying mark on the foreheads of each one of the 144,000. They belong to the Father. The voice, like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder, is the voice of God. Perhaps this is God proclaiming his approval of these 144,000 faithful servants in the spirit of Matthew 25, verse 21. Well done, good and faithful servant. We are told that the elders of Revelation 5:8 have harps. Perhaps this is where their music is heard, to accompany the worshipful singing of the 144,000 as they sing a new song unique to them. It is strange to consider that the 144,000 seem to have their feet planted firmly on Mount Zion, yet their praise ushers them into the very presence of God. In our praise and worship, we really can transport ourselves and be heard in heavenly places. Only the redeemed can truly sing praises to him. Do you? We are not in this group, but we also have been redeemed out of the earth and this world system. Point to ponder. Why could no one else sing the song of the 144,000? because they alone went through testing and tribulation, yet maintained their integrity. Thus they alone could sing of what they were able to observe the Father do on their behalf in the time of tribulation. Every one of us goes through times of tribulation. God's intention is that they might produce in us, as it were, a new song, a symphony. Revelation 14, verse 4. These are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from among men as firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. Revelation 14, verse 5. And no lie was found in their mouth. They are blameless. The description of the 144,000. Many take the virginity of the 144,000 as being symbolic of general purity, as in 2 Corinthians 11:2. But Paul recommended celibacy in distressing times, and Jesus spoke of woes upon those with children and families in that day. It isn't hard to see that God would specifically call 144,000 to a literal celibacy for the kingdom's sake during this period. Does a virgin mean that all of the 144,000 are women? No. Parthenos can be applied to men as well as women. The 144,000 are the beginnings of a great harvest. They are firstfruits. They are the godly nucleus of Israel, which is the token of redemption of the nation. Because they are described as firstfruits, many have thought that they themselves will be instrumental in God's plan for bringing in a great harvest during the tribulation. Revelation 7 verse 9 describes an innumerable company saved out of the great tribulation, and these 144,000, described as firstfruits, may have been used to preach the gospel to those who were saved in this period. So these 144,000 are not the bride of Christ. The church is the bride of Christ, quite obviously in chapter 19. But these are virgins, which do follow the procession. They follow the Lamb, being the firstfruits unto God and unto the Lamb out of the great tribulation period. Clearly, they are believers in Jesus. Otherwise, they would not stand with the Lamb, follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and could not be without fault before the throne of God. This vast multitude, saved during the tribulation, will be saved in exactly the same manner as anyone today, by grace, through a personal faith in Jesus Christ unto salvation. Even though the rapture of the church ends God's dealings with the church as such on earth, it certainly does not change the way people come to salvation or become part of the larger family of God, which includes all the redeemed before and after the church. Revelation 14, verse 6. And I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, having an eternal gospel to preach to those who live on the earth, and to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. Revelation 14, verse 7. And he said with a loud voice, Fear God, and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heaven and the earth and sea and springs of water. An angel preaches the gospel. The angel preaches the gospel and also announces judgment. With the judgment of God so evident on the earth in these days, it's no wonder why the crowd of those saved during the Great Tribulation can't be numbered. The angel calls upon the people of the earth to fear God and give glory to him. They can give glory to God willingly now, or be compelled to give glory to him later. Here is the bitter irony of their lot. Though they damn themselves eternally by their refusal to face the truth, one day they will be forced to face it. Sooner or later, the glory they refuse to give the Creator willingly will be torn from them by the spectacle of his wrath. Verse 6 can be a valid fulfillment of Jesus' promise in Matthew 24:14, that the gospel would be preached to the entire world before his second coming. But this can never be a valid excuse for neglecting the urgency of missions. Although, this is the only place in the New Testament where we see angels preaching the gospel. In God's wisdom, he has chosen to give that responsibility to men alone, apart from the rarest of exceptions. Worship the one who made everything you see, the angel will declare, putting a conclusive end to the evolution-creation debate. Revelation 14, verse 8. And another angel, a second one, followed, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. An angel announces Babylon's fall. More on Babylon will come in chapter 17. Now it is enough to see it as a representation of mankind in organized rebellion against God. Two Babylons are spoken of in Revelation: religious Babylon and commercial Babylon, the false religious system and the oppressive economic system. The second angel declares both are powerless. Revelation 14, verse 9. Then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, Revelation 14, verse 10, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Revelation 14, verse 11. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day and night, those who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. An angel warns of coming judgment. Verse 9 reminds us that there is a connection between worshiping the beast and his image and receiving his mark on his forehead or on his hand. No one will casually or accidentally take the mark. The connection between worshiping the beast and taking the mark will be clear. Although the taking of the mark may, to secular eyes, seem innocent enough, it may be a mere pledge of allegiance and devotion to the Antichrist and his government, even as the burning of a pinch of incense to an image of Caesar and the pledge Caesar is Lord in the early church seemed an innocent act of civic duty to the ancient pagans. Now, this means that God is going to give every man a chance. The first angel proclaims the everlasting gospel. Now this angel warns man against worshiping the beast or taking his mark, so that if a man does take the mark and does worship the beast or his image, he is doing it knowingly. He is doing it willfully and in willful rebellion against God, because he has been deceived into thinking that in the final conflict that will soon be taking place, that Satan and the forces of darkness will be able to overcome the forces of light. Those who worship the Antichrist are forced to drink the wine of the wrath of God. This cup of God's wrath is like undiluted wine, mixed with spices to make it still stronger, full strength. The idea of God holding a cup of wrath, which he makes those under judgment drink, is expressed more than 13 times in the Bible. Psalm 75:8 and Jeremiah 25:15 are examples. This is the idea behind the cup that Jesus desired, if possible, to avoid. Jesus willingly took the cup of the Father's wrath that we deserved. Here, the enemies of Jesus have no choice. The cup is forced upon them. The wine in the cup is associated with wrath, thymos, which is passionate anger. The cup itself is associated with indignation, orge, which is anger from a settled disposition. Orge is the common word for God's anger in the New Testament. Thymos is used only 11 times, and 10 of the 11 are in Revelation. Those who worshipped the Antichrist and received his mark will endure this wrath and indignation for eternity in hell. The modern idea for dispensing with hell has no counterpart in Revelation. Here, the fact of eternal torment is plainly stated. Forever and ever means forever and ever. If the only consequences for sin are in this life, or if the only penalty for sin is temporary, then clever sinners have won out over God. Their torment is in the presence of the Lamb. It is wrong to say that hell will be devoid of the presence of God, but it will be devoid of his love. The presence of Jesus will be there, but only the presence of his holy justice and wrath against sin. That is why at this final opportunity, the gospel will be proclaimed. God would not proclaim it unless there was the opportunity of being saved. And there is that final rejection, that identifying themselves against God, and thus the wrath of God is to be poured out, the cup of his indignation. Indignation is an Old Testament word for the Great Tribulation. You find it used many times in the Old Testament in reference to the tribulation. Revelation 14, verse 12. Here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. Revelation 14, verse 13. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, Write, Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, for the deeds follow with them. The blessedness of the saints, even in the midst of the great tribulation. We can easily contrast the saints' rest with the wicked's continual torment. The rest comes to those who have been patient, enduring, and faithful to God and His Word, the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Their works follow them. The patient endurance and work of these saints is remembered in heaven. Our work for the Lord goes with us into heaven, giving dignity and significance to all work. Clearly, God is trying to encourage His people to be steadfast in times of trial, focused on what blessed rest and rewards awaits them in eternity. Be patient is the word given to those who become Christians during the tribulation, to those who respond to the evangelism of the 144,000, the message of the angels, the powerful testimony of the 2 witnesses in Jerusalem. Be patient is also what we often need to do today. Let God do His work. Revelation 14, verse 14. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and sitting on the cloud was one like a son of man, having a golden crown on his head, and a sharp sickle in his hand. Revelation 14, verse 15. And another angel came out of the temple, crying out with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. Revelation 14, verse 16. Then he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. Time for Jesus to bring in the harvest. Many have difficulty identifying Jesus as the one doing the harvesting here. They have a hard time with Jesus responding to another angel who came out of the temple, but it is unlikely that anyone called the Son of Man and wearing a golden crown is anyone but Jesus. When we are told that the harvest of the earth is ripe, ripe has a bad connotation, to become dry or withered. The idea is of something that is overripe. According to this passage, it would seem that there comes a point in the tribulation when salvation is no longer possible. The 144,000 have been called to heaven. The angels have made their proclamation. And now there will be a separation between those who become Christians in the tribulation and those who don't. So too, in your own tribulation, you need to understand there comes a time when your own heart, even as a believer, can become hardened. The Bible speaks of a root of bitterness that can take hold in the soil of a man's soul. I've seen believers go through tribulation, and rather than allow the Lord's work of grace to take place in their hearts, they choose instead to become bitter and unforgiving. Don't let that happen. Don't be unforgiving. Don't be cynical. Don't be bitter. Don't play that game, because if you let bitterness and unforgiveness continue, there will come a point in your own tribulation when it will become an irreversible part of who you are. Revelation 14, verse 17. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, and he also had a sharp sickle. Revelation 14, verse 8. Then another angel, the one who has power over fire, came out from the altar, and he called out with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, Put in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because her grapes are ripe. Revelation 14, verse 9. So the angel swung his sickle to the earth, and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth, and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Revelation 14, verse 20. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came out from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles. The winepress of God. This vivid picture of judgment was the inspiration for the battle hymn of the Republic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vineyard where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. The image of the second coming of Jesus as a harvest was also communicated in Matthew 13, verses 24 through 30, and 36 through 43. The parable of the wheat and the tares. The implication is that true believers will not be separated from mere church-going religionists until the final harvest. Verse 20 probably describes blood splattering to the horses' bridles, a picture of tremendous carnage in the Battle of Armageddon described in Revelation 16:16 and 19:11 through 19. It is not likely a description of a river of blood running the length of the Promised Land and as high as a horse's bridles. Chapter 14 is the perfect answer to chapter 13, declaring who is really triumphant, powerful, and in control: God, His Messiah, and His people. Not Satan, his Messiah, the Antichrist, and his people. We tend to think of nuclear weapons. The 70,000 extinguished at Hiroshima pales before the 125,000 killed by firearms and bayonets at Iwo Jima earlier that same year. We also forget our own bloody Civil War, which was so vast and terrible that it consumed more American lives than World War I and II, Korea, and Vietnam all combined, all with merely bayonets, firearms, and cannonballs. I recently watched a couple of documentaries on the Civil War and World War II by filmmaker Ken Burns. They were both excellent. The images and first-hand accounts were extremely eye-opening and very sobering. The extent of killing and carnage by all sides was beyond any previous concepts that I had formed in my mind. I will forever look at war differently, but all these will pale in comparison to the battles and wars that will be fought during the tribulation. Psalm 45, verses 3 through 7 is also a prediction of this. It is strange that Israel in its present state does not believe its own scriptures. It is ironic that many Jews are atheists, a contradiction of terms. An agnostic Jew, one who knows what the God he doesn't believe in requires of him. Denying the God of the Old Testament and the relevance of the scriptures to their own destiny, this wine-pressing is a judgment of apostasy, which Jeremiah 30 called the time of Jacob's trouble. We need make no apology for this. Sin is an awful thing. Sin is in the world. You and I are sinners. Christ is the only remedy for us. This judgment will inevitably come upon Christ rejectors. Those who think that the church is going through the Great Tribulation, the day of God's wrath, understand neither the nature of the church nor the nature of the tribulation. They underestimate both. Before that morning dawns, the long night of the human race will grow darker, much darker. This chapter was just a prelude to the bowls that are coming in the next 2 chapters. The doctrine of endless punishment. Throughout the Bible, we see God's love and grace freely available to all who will accept. The entire Bible is a record of the extremes He has gone to in order to allow us to avoid the destiny of our fallen state. People respond, "No, God, I don't want to love you. I want to run things my own way." God has 3 alternatives when confronted with such human rebellion. 1, He can indulge it and allow it to go on forever. But in that case, all the cruelty, injustice, hatred, pain, and death that now prevail on the earth will go on forever too. God does not want that, and neither does man. 2, God can force man to obey and control the human race as if it were all robots. However, removing our free will would also take away our capacity to give our love to God freely. Love cannot be forced. 3, God's only real choice. He must withdraw Himself from those who refuse His love. He must let them have their own way forever. Since God is necessary for our existence, the decision to reject God is the decision to plunge ourselves into the most terrible sense of loneliness and isolation a human being can know, and to endure this eternally without any hope. Physical death is the separation of the soul from the body. Spiritual death is the separation of the soul from God Himself. Ultimately, it is we ourselves who choose whether God will judge us. It is we ourselves who decide either to accept or refuse His grace, love, and forgiveness. It is we ourselves who choose everlasting life or everlasting death.